So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to score 760 on the GMAT. We also call this webinar your GMAT Strategy webinar. My name is Rajesh Sadana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Supporting me in this webinar, we have Komal Shah, who's a GMAT strategy expert, a former Beat the GMAT moderator, and she's going to help us make sure that every query that you have gets answered in this webinar. It's a As the name says, it's a GMAT strategy webinar. We talk about three things in this webinar. First, how do you define a personalized study plan? By the end of this webinar, I want to make sure that each one of you has a really good idea on with regards to how can you create a study plan that's personalized to your strengths, that allocates enough time to overcome your weaknesses. And you have that visibility as to what milestones do you need to achieve to get to your target GMAT score. The second thing that we do in this webinar is to make sure you understand what's important to achieve those improvements. And we talk about the core skills at the GMAT test. And then the third thing that we talk about in this webinar is, as you're studying, how do you track your improvement? So we do have a couple of questions in this webinar, and to make sure that you guys are well prepared to attempt those questions, we did send a few video lessons your way. The video lesson on boldface is a really popular video lesson. It gives people a unified approach towards solving every boldface question, and we're going to solve a boldface question today. So if not gone through that, that's something that's I would recommend that you go through it. Other than that, people love the main point concepts as well. So if GMAT reading comprehension is something that you're looking to improve on, this will get you started along in that direction. We also have some upcoming free webinars. We have a free webinar on how to ace GMAT sentence correction, probably our most popular webinar. Probably 300-400 people attend this at the same time. In this webinar, we look at how can you use GMAT sentence correction by focusing on meaning and logic. It's hosted by Paril Tandon, who invented the meaning-based approach to tackle GMAT sentence correction. She was the first person in 2010 to really associate meaning and GMAT sentence correction. Then next Sunday, we have a free webinar on how to solve number properties question, more specifically primes, LCM, and GCD. And again, fairly application-focused webinar. We do send foundational video lessons your way if you register for this webinar. So if you've not done so, do register for these two webinars. So this is a free webinar. We ask a few leading questions just to make sure that we can personalize this webinar to this group as a whole. One of the first leading questions that we have is, when do you plan to take the test? And essentially, based on the data that I have over here, what I can really see is two large groups, one in the 46 to 75 days, those who haven't taken their data as of yet. These two groups count for about 70% of the students here. Then we have about 21% of the students who have their exam in about a month to 45 days. And then about 12 to 13% in about 30 days. That is great. Let's talk about your target GMAT scores. What are your target GMAT scores? And then as a group, let's kind of understand where you currently stand. What are your current GMAT scores? So target GMAT scores as well as your current GMAT scores. And let me actually remove this so we have a bit more real estate available. I'm going to give you guys another 10 seconds to put in the responses before I share those responses with everyone. So again, guys, target GMAT scores, I only have 80 responses. Can I get a few more? With regards to current GMAT scores, only 65. I'd love to get a few more responses over here. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end this poll. With regards to target GMAT score, I'm going to move this away over here, and I'm going to broadcast results so you guys can see that. With regards to current GMAT score, let me also end the poll, broadcast the results. So target GMAT scores, 30% of you aiming for a 710, 720, another 37% of you are aiming for a 730 to 750, and about 18% of you are aiming for a 760 or higher. So yeah, 54% in 55% in that 730 plus range. Add another 32. So it's about 12 and a half, 85% or more are aiming for a score higher than 700. With regards to the current GMAT score, 31% of you don't know your score as of yet. But that's something which you should know. So I'd recommend that you take a mock test, and I'll be happy to share the link for our Sigma X mock. But essentially, where you guys lie, what you really see is almost an equal spread in the from the 400 to the 650 bracket. A few of you are in the 710, 720 range, and then a few of you are in the 600 to 660 to 700 range or so. So we have all sorts of people represented. If you don't know your score, most likely you are going to be in that 400 to 600 score range itself, is what I would put you in. But yeah, we have a few folks who's high scorers, but most of you are in the 400 to 600 range, need upwards of 100 points of score improvement to get to your target GMAT score. So with that, let's go right into the webinar pane. The screen will be in the process of changing for you. So I'm going to give you give the system another 30 odd, or rather 20 odd seconds for the screen to settle down. Once you see the slide which says GMAT Strategy session along with my photograph, then select yes. That way I know this is me, by the way. All right, it seems pretty much everyone can see that. That's really good. Thank you. Okay, so that essentially three parts of this webinar. In the first part, I'm going to give you a brief introduction to e-GMAT, and in this introduction, I'm going to talk about the tools that we provide so that each one of you can get a personalized assessment of what your starting scores are. Even those who have taken a mock test will get way more insights than they've ever gotten with regards to taking a mock test and defining their starting points. So we'll give that introduction in this part. We'll give you these tools in this part. Then we'll go into the core of this webinar, which is how do you create your personalized strategy? How do you study properly, and how do you track your improvement? That's going to be after that 15 minutes, but another 105 minutes or so. And then towards the end, if there's any question that hasn't been answered, we're going to have an open-ended Q&A to respond to that question. Okay, so I asked this question, what's your target GMAT score? And 55% of you said 730 or higher. While that may be true, statistically, only 6% of the people really get to those scores. And this is despite the fact that when you look at the median scores at top B schools, they've been going up for a few years and they continue to go up, or they're at a point where you'd call them sky high. Again, you can look at where this data is coming from. Now, what is it that a good number of people who get to those scores do? A good percentage of them use e-GMAT. Why do we say that? When you look at key stats on GMAT Club and Beat the GMAT, or which is verified reviews or number of success stories, you're going to actually come to a very similar conclusion. More people put in their reviews with their success with e-GMAT than do for all the other major prep companies combined. Similarly, more people mention e-GMAT on GMAT Club Share GMAT Experience Forum than do all other major prep companies combined. So what makes our students more successful, other than the fact that I believe they're very diligent students? I think if there's one thing that makes that difference, is it's our approach to your GMAT preparation, or the architecture of learning that we provide. So when you think about learning architectures that exist today, you're going to find that there are two predominant architectures that exist in the world today. One is what we call as the book-based architecture, and the other is what we call as a private tutoring-based approach. And when you map all the audiovisual courses that are out there, what you're going to find is most of them are built around this book-based architecture. Whereas when you map e-GMAT to one of these two architectures, you're going to find that there's a lot more alignment with this private tutoring-based approach. So to understand this alignment, let's kind of understand, how do you ace the GMAT? What's an efficient way of getting to a score of 720 or higher? And 720 seems to be a sweet spot over here. So the first thing you need to do is to really make sure that create a customized path towards your goal. How many of you over here today believe that you have a personalized study plan? Select yes if you believe you have a personalized study plan. Select no otherwise. Okay, that is great. But 15% of you believe you have a personalized study plan, about 20%, let's call it. So the first thing you have to do is you have to have that vision as to what milestones do you need to hit to get to that target score. How much effort do you need to get there? Then Once you have a really good estimate, you need to really learn the concepts. Your areas of weaknesses, you need to fix those. Your areas of strength, you need to make sure that you know everything over there. And just knowing those concepts is important. You need to really know how to apply those concepts and get so good at applying them that you are in that top 6 percentile or top 3 percentile or top 1 percentile of students. So that's kind of how you get to a 720 score. Starting with that personalized path, make sure you learn properly, make sure you ensure or you evaluate yourself when you're learning things to ensure that when you learn things for the first time, you do them really, really well. And to the extent that you are in that top 3, top 4 percentile of students. So let's see how a book-based approach tackles this problem. A book-based approach is all about autonomy, which means that, hey, when you study using books, you get a couple of study plans. Those, predominantly you'll get a quant and a verbal focus study plan. But beyond that, there's no customization. And essentially, you take one of those 2 study plans, you start studying. Half the time, you're studying what you already know. When you go on to learning concepts, and books really do a very good job of teaching you concepts. The only problem while learning concepts with books is that burden of validation as to how well you've learned the concept is completely on a student. So you read a chapter in a book and 1,000 people read the same chapter. They learn to 1,000 different degrees and they don't realize whether they've learned it properly to be able to move on to the next topic or not. One area where books don't do as great a job is teaching you how to apply those concepts for 2 reasons. One is, just the static nature of books doesn't lend itself towards telling you how do you approach a problem in step 1, step 2, step 3 again and again and again. And the second thing is a book's very limited by the number of pages it publishes, and then essentially even when you get solutions, you don't get solutions that are as comprehensive. And so a lot of people who study from books resort to solving hundreds and hundreds of questions. They go onto forums, they look at solutions in all kinds of formats, and only the brightest are able to kind of knit through those formats and are able to master that application. And again, when it comes to the evaluation of mastery, what really happens is people who study using books, they take a number of mock tests and what I call as is they're just trying to tool their abilities to perfection by taking 10, 15 mock tests. And again, even when you take a mock test, you still have to evaluate it, and that onus of evaluation is completely on the other student. And most of you are not methodical enough to know how to evaluate a mock test. A private tutoring architecture, we're talking about learning architectures here, works very differently. When you work with a good private tutor will spend the first couple of hours understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and it will give you a clear idea as to where do you need to focus on, how much time are you likely to take to get to that point. Then a private tutor will teach you concepts and evaluate you while teaching you concepts, and do the same thing with application. And one area where private tutor makes the biggest difference is to tell you how to apply those concepts. When you solve a problem, what do you do in step 1, what do you do in step 2, step 3, and so on and so forth. And then as you're solving problems, a good private tutor will assess your performance frequently and give you precise feedback. Now, once you get so good at solving problems, a good private tutor would really move you from one topic to the other, but only when you become good enough to hit that 90th or 95th percentile in that particular area. So what's the key differences between 2 approaches? Even though you're learning the same content, the extent of personalization, the extent of feedback, and the extent of application is much higher in the private tutor-based approach, and you can really see why that approach is way more successful than the book-based approach. And successful not only in the domain of GMAT, but in general learning. So let's see, why do we really say that most of the other courses are built around this book-based approach, whereas e-GMAT's built around this private tutor-based approach? Let's see, how would you do that if you're someone who's starting at a score of 600, want to get to that 720 score, because most of you need at least 100+ point score improvement, if not higher. So as a first step, a private tutor would help you define a path to the goal. And we've done the same thing. We've actually built a tool called GMAT Planner, in which it's an AI-driven tool that allows each one of you to understand where you need to put in the effort and how much time would you need. So how does this tool work? It takes in your starting quant and your starting verbal scores, and it then uses that to give you a recommendation of what your target and quant and verbal scores would be. Now, depending on what your starting score split is, it can actually personalize this recommendation, and it does give you a recommendation. It goes through about 50 different combinations based on your target score and gives you the most likely score that you have the highest probability of achieving. Now, you don't study quant and you don't study verbal. You actually study number properties. You study in quant, you study sentence correction in verbal. So it then tells you what abilities should you put in arithmetic and algebra to hit that Q50, and what abilities should you aim for in sentence correction, critical reasoning, and reading comprehension. This data is not available in public domain. The reason why we have this data is because we have tens of thousands of score reports, and we've used AI engines to extract this information from there. You won't find this data anywhere. Now, when this does that, your study plan becomes a set of 5 targeted milestones. On the quant side, you will go from these starting abilities over here to these target abilities, and on the verbal side you will go from essentially these starting abilities to these target abilities. Now, some of you may be asking, hey, where can you actually get these starting abilities? Because no mock test provides that. We actually have a mock test called a Sigma X mock where you can get these abilities. So if you go to your free trial, or if you're a paid student, if we go to the menu in the top left hand corner, you can take a Sigma X mock, and it'll give you these starting ability scores, and that tells you where you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Then it creates that personalized study plan, looking at your starting abilities as well as your target abilities, and based on the data that we have from tens of thousands of students, it estimates the amount of time you need to spend to be able to get there. So you actually get a very clear idea of based on the number of hours you're willing to spend every day, when can you, if you start studying the next day, when can you take the GMAT? Now you can even customize this. So it gives you essentially a day-by-day study plan overall. Now, when this happens, your personalized GMAT preparation becomes a set of 5 mini preparations where you're going from a starting level of 50 percentile to 89 percentile in SC, and so on and so forth in CR and RC. And again, this is where it also creates a calendar view for you. You can really see it takes into account the number of hours you can put in every day, and then it tells you what should you study when and how many hours should you put in on those days. So why did we spend 1,000+ hours building the GMAT Planner? So that each one of you can create your personalized study plan in as few as 7 minutes. And upwards of 6,000 students today, since 25th of February, have created their personalized study plan. That's just the study planning thing. Just go to gmatplanner.com. And you should be able to get there. And Komal, if you could also share the link with everyone for let me actually do that. Here's the link for GMAT Planner, and here is the link for a Sigma X mock test. So once you have a personalized study plan, what a good private tutor would do is teach you concepts and give you feedback on how well you've learned concepts. Let's see how our technology architecture does this. This is one of the 50 modules that are there in the e-GMAT course on the verbal side of things. And what you see over here is that you learn concepts and you get personalized feedback on each one of the concepts. So clearly this particular student hasn't done a great job over here, hasn't done a great job over here. And so when you do the concept, you actually get the feedback. You get inputs with regards to whether you should revise that concept or not, or should you move forward. And this feedback just while learning is super valuable, because when you take that feedback into account and act as per it, The moment you complete the course, there's a very high probability that you're going to start to hit those target percentiles very soon. Now, how does this compare to some of the other online courses out there? This is a popular course by Magoosh. Again, a similar module where you have subject verb. And what you really see is A, it's not as comprehensive. B, there is no feedback. This time over here is essentially the time of the video, not the time that you spent on it. There are no exercises within it overall. Then a private tutor will teach you application of concepts, and again, how does he or she teach you application of concepts? By telling you what you need to do in step 1, what you need to do in step 2 and step 3. So you don't just do blind practice, you do practice with a certain method in mind. At e-GMAT, we build an entity called an application file, and this application file, you get one or more application files within every module. For example, in modifiers, we have 3 application files, so in which we tell you how to approach questions. We evaluate you right then and there on those questions, and then we also give you a set of selected official guide questions on which you can really evaluate how good you are at applying yourself. And this is how every module in the Quant or verbal course is architected. Now, again, when you compare this to the Magoosh course, what you're going to find is there is no application file. That emphasis on application is not there. You have this one quiz over here with 5 questions, but this quiz is actually common to not just subject verb, but auxiliary verbs as well as pronoun. And there's no scoring over here either. I mean, you get the score in the quiz, but it doesn't come onto the dashboard. The intent is not to give you feedback, but to really just simply give you practice. Now, the next thing is about evaluation of mastery, because you need to know when you're studying sentence correction whether you've hit that 90th percentile or not. And that's really, really important, because you're not just studying SC to learn about subject verb or modifiers or parallel lists. You're doing this because you want to hit that 90th percentile, because only then will you be able to get to your target score. How do we do this? We build this tool called Rhenium, in which you can take an ability quiz, and once you take an ability quiz, it tells you how you're doing in each aspect of sentence correction. So over here, it's very clear that this particular student has not hit that 90th percentile, and the reason why that student hasn't hit his or her target ability is because this particular student is not doing it so well in comparison. So the beauty of this system is that you can really now go back, revise the comparison module. After revising the comparison module, you can go back, take another ability quiz, and see whether you've actually improved or not. Okay, so you can really see why do we say that most of the other courses are built around this book-based approach, whereas e-GMAT's built around this private tutor-based architecture. Who's created some of these courses? Some of GMAT Club's top-rated instructors have created these courses. Instructors who are, amongst the top 5 out of the 300-odd instructors on GMAT Club, and have been reviewed a lot more frequently on GMAT Club. So while only 6% of the people get to those 720 scores, you can really see why our students are way more successful. With that, we are starting our batch for live courses next week. Every live course comes with probably the world's best guarantee out there. With Verbal Live, we offer up to 7, or with GMAT Live, we offer up to +7 points guarantee on your verbal course, and this guarantee goes all the way up to 98th percentile. So even if your current score is V40, we still guarantee a V43 overall, which I think no course in the world dares to guarantee. And you can go and look at the reviews of GMAT Live Prep and see that. And on the Quant side, again, a very similar guarantee. It goes all the way up to Q50. And this is a pure guarantee, which means that that essentially, if you take the test, if you already have a starting score on the official test, and you take our course and then you take the test again, and you don't improve, we refund your money. Which is unlike what some of the other courses do, where they really say you've got to take the test at least twice. We don't ask you to do that. These are the course calendars, or this is the course calendar. You can really see a batch starting with Quant and a batch starting with Verbal overall. With that, you can connect with me, and we can also really connect with upwards of 12,000 students. We also share about 6 to 7 articles every week on various B schools and preparation strategies. The course calendar is in the top right hand corner. You can really click on the file and download them. If you've joined using a desktop, whether it's a Windows or a Mac, you should be able to do that. Otherwise, you can always write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com and we can send the course calendar, because if you've logged in using a tablet or a cell phone, you would not be able to download that. Okay, so with that, let's get to the second part of the webinar, which is, how do you define your GMAT strategy? Let's go in a bit more detail, although I think you have a number of tools over here. So in the second part, which is going to be the core of this webinar, I want to make sure each one of you has your own personalized strategy where you know what's going to be a target quant score, what's going to be a target verbal score, and how much time would you need there. Then I want to make sure each one of you understands what's the importance of focusing on core skills while learning. You may have the right plan. You know, it doesn't mean you'll get to your target score. You've got to study the right way. I want to make sure that you focus on the right things while studying. And then we'll talk about why is it that core skills are important to get to those 730, 740, 760 scores, and how can you improve on those core skills. 90% of the people don't even know what exactly those core skills are in the context of the GMAT. And then we're going to really look at how can you track your improvement as you're learning. So essentially, what should be your target, what's important to achieve those targets, and how can you track whether you're actually achieving those targets or not. With that, let's talk about this word strategy, this often overused word strategy. Let me just get in a poll question. I mean, you guys know what strategy is. So when you hear the word strategy, what comes to your mind? All right, let's get a few more responses. Question is, when you hear the word strategy, what comes to your mind? All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let me broadcast the results. A good number of you have actually given a really good response. The way when most of you are saying plan, plan, and plan. When you think of a plan, a strategy, and a plan, they're kind of very parallel. So that's really good. Those who are really talking about tactics or tricks, that's not what strategy is. Tactics and tricks are hacks. And I know if you're from India, we love hacks, but when it comes to the GMAT, hacks don't work. They may work on the Indian equivalent of the GMAT, which is the CAT, but GMAT's a very, very different exam. And when it comes to tricks or hacks, they don't work on the GMAT. I'm going to demonstrate that to you in about an hour or so. So what is strategy? It's a plan of action which is designed to achieve a particular goal. So there are 3 things that you're going to notice in this particular statement over here. One, that it's goal driven. Your strategy for a 730 is going to be very different from that for 760. The way you study for a 730 is going to be very different from how you would study for a 760. The second thing is it's designed, which means it's personalized to you. And the third thing is it's a plan of action. It's a sequence of steps. Your strategy doesn't really stop at saying, I'm going to aim for this quant and this verbal score. That's not a strategy. That's a beginning of a strategy, but that's not the complete strategy. You've got to really reason it out. You've got to really create that path to the target quant or a target verbal score. You've got to really put in a few more reinforcements. So if this is what a strategy is, then what's a good strategy? A good strategy is something which provides maximum benefit. And benefit in the context of GMAT is the score improvement with the least input. And the word least is not the same as less input. Least is a comparative word, which means compared to all the other options, the input that you provide in this path, the strategy that you choose, is less than what you would have provided or what you would have given in had you chosen another path. And the principle that a good strategy works on is it capitalizes on your strengths and then spends enough time to make sure that you overcome your weakness. And that's the general principle that you're going to find that's there in strategy everywhere, whether it's the GMAT, whether it's running a business, whether it's studying for a particular test, which is not an adaptive test like the GMAT, and so on, whether it's about getting marks in a B school and so on and so forth. So there's certain hallmarks of a good strategy. The first thing which is there is it is goal driven. Means you got to have a target GMAT score in your mind, and you've got to be very serious about achieving that score. One thing that I find is 80 to 90% of the people that say I'm going to get to a 730, they're not super serious about it and they're happy with taking a 650 or 700. If you want to get to a 730, make sure that you're serious about it. You know why that 730 is important to you, or a 760. Then a good strategy starts with an analysis of your current situation and your current strengths. Now let me ask a question over here. How many of you, when you started studying for the GMAT, went to a friend of yours and really asked that particular friend, hey, how long did it take for you to study for the test? And assume that if that guy studied for the test in 3 months, you're going to take the same 3 months. If that particular student, focus a certain percentage of his or her time on quant and a certain other percentage on verbal, that's what you're going to do. How many of you kind of really more or less took your friend's strategy and really said the same thing's going to work for you? And be honest about it over here. I'm going to remove broadcast results so that we get more honest responses, so that we don't have what we call as the group bias in here. Let's get a few more responses. I just have 60 responses so far. How many of you took your friend's strategy and said more or less that the same thing is going to work for me? Because this guy used the strategy to get to a 730, the same thing is going to work for me to get to a 730 as well. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Let me broadcast the results. About 40% of you did that, and that 40% may not be on the right path to your target GMAT score. By the way, even if you took a strategy or a study plan that you saw on a blog, even that is essentially doing the same thing. Now, why is that bad? When you go to your friend, and you may have completely different starting points. Your friend may be really good in quant, whereas you may not be, or you may be really good in quant, whereas your friend may not be. And because of those starting points, the emphasis required for you and your friend could be very different. Your friend may have a very different situation in his or her personal or professional life than you do. You may have a very demanding spouse, which means you can't put in 2 good hours a day, whereas your friend can study 3 hours a day. You may not have as taxing a job as your friend does, or vice versa. So either way, all of these things have an impact on for how long do you need to study, and essentially what is the likelihood of your success. If you go to our website, we have a success story page, and you'd really see that categorized by people who've done the test and aced the test in 30 days. Now, only about 20% of the students ace the test in 30 days or fewer. But those who do that, they have that focused approach towards studying, and you have their LinkedIn profiles. You can go and check that. But are those 20% a lot smarter than the remaining 80% who need a couple of months or 3 months? No, it's just that those 20% have an ability to spend more time. Those 20% have starting points which are closer to the test. They need probably 100-point score improvement or so versus 200 points of score improvement. But essentially, there's a reason why those 20% of students are able to ace the test in a month or less, whereas the other 80% require 30 days or more. And there's no right or wrong over here. It's just that it's important to know what's going to work for you. Then you need to have good assumptions, and that's something which is really, really important with regards to this. There are some people who learn new things really, really fast. Others do not. I'll give you an example in my case. When I was in college, and this seems like a lifetime ago, but we're talking about 97, 98. I had this friend who was a batch topper. Now, this guy was very peculiar. Throughout our semester, he wouldn't study at all. 20 days before the exam, he would just start studying. And this guy had this such an amazing ability to focus that in those 20 days he would learn everything, understand things well, and essentially do so well that out of a class of 400 students, he was the topper 7 out of 8 semesters. And the 8th semester he was a second rank holder. So essentially that worked for him. He was really good at absorbing new information. Now, had I followed that strategy, I probably wouldn't be where I am. Now, what does that say about me? Does it mean I'm not as smart as him? No, it's just that I have a different learning style. Now, and each one of you has your own learning styles, and you've had 20 plus years of learning history. You know that about yourself. When you're planning for the test, take that into account as well. And after taking all of those things into account, you have to plan and execute. But the thing which you have to be really, really cognizant of is that a good strategy has to be personal. It has to be devised by you, and it has to have numerous checks in place to ensure that you're actually improving and moving in the right direction. Now, we've talked about strategy. I want to make sure that each one of you understands this one key term called percentile on the test, because when it comes to the GMAT, the word percentile is embedded everywhere. So what's percentile? Your percentile is your relative rank out of a population. So let's assume that about 250,000 people take the test. The real number is slightly lower, but 250K leads to good math, and I like that number. So when you get to a 99th percentile, what it really means is that you're among the top 1 percentile of students, or you're among the top 2,500 students, or that you're better than 247,500 students when it comes to the overall GMAT. When you get to the score of 700, you are at 88th percentile, which means you are among the top 30,000 students, or you're better than 220,000 students who take the GMAT. So what's important over here? What's important over here is that to understand that GMAT's a comparative number. Also, you see when you get to a 700 score of 700, there are 30,000 people who are as good or better than you. Okay, whereas when you get to a 760, there are only 2,500 students. Now, the top 15 schools in the world have about 14,000 seats or so, or 12 to 13,000 seats overall, and you can really see why a 760 or a 740 would be a lot more attractive than a 700 to them. Now, there's another term that you guys know very well of, which is what we call as accuracy. What is accuracy? When you take a quiz, it's a percentage of questions that you answer correctly. The word accuracy has no percentile built into it. There's absolutely zero aspect of percentile. You may have 80% accuracy in a quiz. Your percentile could still be 50th percentile of half the people who take that quiz essentially solve 8 out of 10 questions correctly or more. You're going to see me talk about another term called ability. Okay, what is ability? It's that percentile that we talked about over here, mapped not just to the entire GMAT, but to either quant or verbal or sentence correction or number properties or arithmetic or algebra. So it's your percentile or your rank in a particular context. So when you start studying for the test, the first thing you've got to really do is make sure you define your quant as well as your verbal split. Okay, how do you define your quant and verbal split? Let's kind of take some examples, and then I'm going to give you the link to GMAT Planner where you can go and do that. So if you want to score 700 is that pivotal point where people say, let me first get to 700, and I'm going to then think about a plan to get to a 740 from there on. So let's say I'm going to divide this entire group into 3 different segments. Someone who's extremely strong in quant, we call that particular person a quant whiz. Someone who's strong in quant, but wouldn't call himself a quant whiz. It's not super strong in quant. And the third person would be someone who's not strong in quant. And even if you're strong in verbal, not strong in quant, or if you're not strong in either quant or verbal, you'd put yourself in that third particular group, which is not strong in quant. Hold on, let's kind of get this question here. What's your strength? Quant, verbal, or neither? Let's just get this poll over here just to make sure we are able to map this group. So the question is, what is your strength? 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. 62% of you say quant's your strength, but 11% of you say verbal's your strength, and 27%, consider neither quant nor verbal to be your strength. That's wonderful. Thank you very much, guys. So if you quant is your strength, you'd put yourself in one of these two groups. So let's say you're a quant whiz, aim for a Q50 or a Q51, which means make sure you get to a Q49 and a V33, V34 before you start optimizing towards that 760 score. Study with quant. If you really are a quant whiz, you should need about 6 days to 7 days of prep to get to a Q49. If you're someone who's strong in quant but you're not a quant whiz, aim for a Q40 or Q49, which means you need to do slightly better in verbal to get to a 700 score. If you're someone who's not strong in quant or someone who's strong in verbal, both of those folks in both these groups actually get to the not strong in quant quadrant over here. Make verbal your strength. Why? Because if you're not strong in quant, if you don't have that foundation, what you're going to find is that the quant syllabus is a lot more vast than the verbal syllabus. So if neither quant nor verbal is your strength, making verbal your strength is a lot more easy than making quant your strength. So aim for a high verbal score, which is a V42 or V43, and then do the required work in aiming for the quant score. Now, one thing which probably is very clear, which you can infer, is if you're not strong in either verbal or quant, you probably need more time to study for the GMAT. And that's okay. Why? Because in the end, it doesn't matter how long you studied. What matters is that you actually got a certain score. No one's going to ask you a question as to how long did you study to get to a certain score. Okay, Nikhil says, shouldn't one focus on completing the bridge on the topics that they're weak on, since there's a larger area of information to be covered, and capitalizing strength is generally easier than bridging the gap on weakness? Nikhil, that's a great question. Okay, actually I'm answering the question on this particular slide. So some of you may be asking, it's like, why the hell does it matter whether your strategy is A, quant driven or verbal driven? After all, you've got to study both sections. And the answer to this is the 3 reasons why you should first focus on the area of your strengths. The first thing is efficiency, which means that if you're focusing on the areas of your strength, you're going to improve at least 3 times faster, and you're going to get to your target score a lot sooner. The second thing, which is really, really important, is that, and let me ask this question. How many of you over here are working professionals? How many of you are working professionals? Select yes if you are. %85 of you are working professionals. Okay. How easy is it for you to study for the test and focus on studying for the test day after day, after coming back from work? Can you type in your answer? It's very tough, right? It's not easy. You keep missing days. Again, doing it consistently, not doing it on one day, but how many of you have done it consistently for a month or more? It's yeah, you're very tired. Now, one of the things that's the worst thing that can happen when you're very tired is that you don't get the confidence or motivation to really study. Now, the beauty of starting from your strengths is it helps you get in your momentum. Okay. And that's something which is really important, to get into that momentum of studying. When you're starting to study for the test, imagine after a long day of work, or imagine studying early morning if that's what you prefer, and starting off with a topic that you don't have a lot of familiarity with, and if you've not been studying for a very long time, or if you've been out of your school for 2 to 3 years, learning a new topic adds to that inertia. So you've got to allocate that study time. That is inertia. Learning a new topic adds to that inertia. If, on the other hand, you start from a topic that you know that you studied before, that you know that you're likely to do very well at, just because you know of it, that transition to studying regularly becomes a lot easier. Does that make sense? All right. So that's why always start with an area of your strength. Okay. The third thing which is there, which you know, a lot of people think that doesn't happen, but you won't believe how much it happens with people, is that a lot of you really say, hey, I'm going to study with my area, start with my area of weakness, but I will make sure that I spend enough time in my areas of strength. But when you start with your areas of weakness, that sucks you in so much that towards the end you're rushing towards spending time in your areas of strength. I mean, we get so many students who you know get to a V40, V41, which is 94th percentile, and then end up with just a Q48 and end up scoring something like a 710, 720. And when I look at the background, these are people from IIT or NITs or BITS Pilani, and or you know, our economists over here in the US. And I asked them what happened in Quant, and their response really is we just couldn't get the time to study for Quant just because we were focusing so much on verbal. And you know, you might think it won't happen, but it will happen, and I've seen it happen so many times. And that 720, or that not focus on the area of your strength, whether it's Quant or verbal, could be the difference between of about $80,000 to $90,000 with regards to you not getting a fellowship versus you getting an admit into the top schools in the world. So Nikhil, hopefully that answers your question, and really great question, by the way. So how do you get your personalized study plan? We talked about, you know, 3 cases, but each one of you is different. Try GMAT Planner. So if you just go to gmatplanner.com, you'll get to the PSP. But even before that, get your starting abilities from the Sigma X mock test, and at the end of your GMAT Planner, each one of you should have this kind of a study plan. Chaitali, as I said, if you're not good in either Quant or verbal, or both Quant or verbal, you know, you've got to first start with verbal. Make verbal your area of strength, because it's a lot easier to master verbal than Quant for that particular individual. Is there an app for GMAT Planner? No, there isn't. You know, one thing that I will tell you is, if you want to study seriously, please don't study on a phone. You know, study on a tablet at least. You know, give yourself a good chance. A phone only consumes about 5 to 8% of your visual cortex, and while you can watch videos on a phone, when it comes to learning, which taxes your brain, your phone's not the best thing. Why? Because essentially when you're focusing on something small, you're stressing your eyes a lot more. So don't study on a phone. You can revise things on a phone, but not study. And then again, the e-GMAT website works beautifully on a phone. But again, if you're learning something for the first time, if you're taking quizzes, do not do it on a phone, please. So let's talk about why should you score high. What's the difference between a 710 and a 760 or a 740? So Jason says, why does the study plan Quant and verbal scores not match the actual scores I received? Because he said, for example, I got a Q48 and a V33 for a score of 660. So Jason, because there are about 40 ways you can get to a 660 and gives you one option, and if you really say customize it and you enter Q48, it will automatically take you to a V33. So there is a neural network in there that does that. You can really say, hey, I want to enter my own scores, and the moment you enter your own scores, you enter your Quant score, it will automatically adjust your verbal score. So yeah, just click on that option which says customize I want to enter my scores. Does that help, Jason? Good question again. Okay, so yeah. Okay, Jason says if I enter Q48, it gets back to V32. And Jason, that's okay, because the thing really is, you know, there are but 4 ways when you enter a Q48 to get to a 680, and V32 is the most likely way. So, you know, V32 versus V33, not much of a difference. The reason why we built that automation in was because when we did not build that automation in, where what people would do is they'll enter a Q48, they'll enter a V28, and they'll still assume that it gets to a 680. So to make sure that we avoid user error, the neural network build that smartness in. So, but I want each one of you to uh, to have this kind of a study plan. So let's talk about the importance of high GMAT scores, and really, it used to happen when I was studying for the test that you did really well in quant and you did reasonably okay in verbal, you'd get to a 720 or so, and then you'd get an admit, because 720 during my time was 97th percentile. So let's kind of talk about the importance of quant and verbal. And now, this is an article that was written about 5 years ago. It was an article that appeared in Wall Street Journal, and the article was titled, "On B-School Test, Americans Fail to Measure Up." If you Google this, you can get to this article. When you get the PDF of this particular webinar, you're going to also be able to click on this article and over here. So what this article essentially said is that high GMAT scores from China and India have led to B schools now receiving a separate ranking for US students. So when you get a 760 and you get 99 percentile, overall you have a 99 percentile, but compared to Asians, you may be at a 97th percentile. And when an American gets a 740, overall that person may have a 97th percentile, but compared to white Caucasians or compared to Americans in general, that person may actually have a 99 percentile at a 740. So again, here's the excerpt from the article. It says, to address those concerns, what are the concerns? That Americans aren't scoring as high because there's so many Asians who score high. GMAC, which is the organization that runs the test, introduced the benchmarking tools, and this tool allows admission officers to compare applicants against their own cohort, filtering scores and percentile rankings by world, region, country, and gender, and college GPA. So they can do all of that now. And Sarah Nahar, actually, who's the dean of MBA admissions at Darden, she actually said, I was amongst those who contacted GMAC for help. Why did she contact GMAC for help? She said, I need to be able to show my scholarship committee, which includes faculty, that this person is in the top 5% of test takers in that particular region, even though that individual might not rank highly against test takers worldwide. So a few takeaways from here. One is, when it comes to top school, GMAT's really important at top school. There used to be a school of thought which says once you get to a 720, the importance of GMAT goes away. No, it doesn't. We go to this conference called the e-GMAT conference, where we're one of the sponsors, and essentially, every top admission officers from all top B schools come there, and we do a set of case studies where we have a few students, and we work with admission officers to select some and reject others. And trust me, those guys, when we see them, we interact with them, we see them choose students, they'd actually choose a 760 or a 740. They'll really differentiate on the GMAT scores even over there. The other piece is, you're not competing against others in your region, which means that you really need to do well on the test, which means you need to do well on both quant and verbal. A third thing, something that we always knew but has been officially stated now, that when it comes to scholarships, your GMAT score plays up almost 50% of role. So just a data point, what percentage of students do you think when it comes to American B schools receive some form of a scholarship or financial aid? What percentage of students receive that in 2018? Let me just view votes so that I can really tell that person. Okay. All right. We have two people who fairly close. The correct answer is 61%. And then the two people was Ravi, I think, who said 60%. And then there's someone who said 65, Lisa, who said 65%. Yeah, you guys are very close to the real number. Now, 61% of students get some form of scholarship. Out of those 61%, about 10 to 11% of them get full fellowships. Means you don't pay a single penny for your MBA. Out of those 10 and 11%, about 3% of them get paid to doing an MBA, and which means you get money in your pocket for studying there. Okay, so it's a huge amount. Here's a chart that was or some data point that were compiled by folks on GMAT Club, and it was based on data from 3,000 students. And this isn't e-GMAT data, this is GMAT Club data. And what they really looked at is the probability of admission based on GMAT score. And what you can really see is if your GMAT score is 760 or higher at top schools, you have close to a 50% chance of admission. As I talked about this e-GMAT conference, and this is a week-long conference where we spend time with admission directors from various B schools. Sometimes even the deans come over there. Last year we had the dean from Stanford come to a conference. It was hosted at Kellogg and GSP Chicago and Ross. So multiple attempts. Some of you are worried about multiple attempts showing up. Most schools don't care. In fact, schools even say, if you've applied to the school, you haven't heard from us as a decision. If you've improved your test, let us know of that test score. If you've been waitlisted, schools really say that, hey, take the GMAT again, improve your GMAT score. I mean, the director of admissions from Columbia said, when you're waitlisted, you have a 7 to 8 month time to really show an improvement in your profile. Other than retaking the GMAT, what else can you do in that shorter time frame? If you want to apply to Harvard, Stanford, GSP Chicago, Stern, Columbia, Wharton, finance-focused schools, make sure you get a Q47 at least. Why? Because otherwise, they worry about your ability to take on the coursework. The professors over there would push back, or they do push back. Some schools, not all, really use your GMAT score as a filter to even, they won't even read your application if you don't reach a certain GMAT score. And again, when I ask those admission directors, they say because we get just so many students from that particular pool, we can pick and choose. When it comes to scholarships, two things matter. One is your GMAT score. Second is how well you do in your interview. And if you do well in your interview, and if you have a good GMAT score, you're very likely to get a scholarship or a full fellowship. In fact, what was funny was one of our students about 2.5 months back, he got a 720. He applied to certain schools. He got full fellowship from one. He got a partial scholarship from the other. To the other one, he basically said, "I really like you. I really bring in some additional qualities." And here's a success story that I wrote on GMAT Club. He wrote his debrief on GMAT Club Share GMAT Experience Forum. And the admission committee read his debrief. They upped his scholarship from partial to full within a day. I mean, just the impact of communicating with admissions. What kind of schools and test prep companies attend these conferences? You can really see all the top schools, all the top test prep companies are there. Okay. Now, this was some statistical data. Let me share some anecdotal data. Here's a student of ours called Victor Makula, who scored a 770. He received full fellowship from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Full fellowship from Ross is more or less unheard of. And he also received an admit from Wharton. He scored V44 on his GMAT. I mean, this guy is not African American. He's actually from Africa. You watch his interview. You can actually watch his interview by clicking on the link over here when you get the PDF, and you can really see he doesn't speak perfect English. He spent $600 on his GMAT preparation and MBA application and received more than 200,000 in fellowships. How did he improve? To get to that score? He used data, analytics to refine and isolate his weakness and get there. Here's another example of a guy. I talked about people not just getting full fellowships but getting paid to study. This guy is studying at Ohio Fisher. He got 4 full fellowships. Again, as you watch his interview, what you're going to find is not perfect English overall, but he got a V44 as well. And he's now getting paid $1,700 a month to study at Ohio Fisher. Look at his profile. He doesn't have any extracurricular and not perfect English. And the reason why he got this was because he kept things simple. He knew what to do when it comes to the GMAT. He knew what needed to be done when it comes to the interview. Here's an example of a student who actually had never dreamt of getting to a high score. Pravi is a businesswoman. She's a really busy person. Her target score was 680. She said, if I get a 680, that's good enough. But she said, I'm going to take one more attempt, which is when she used e-GMAT, and she got improved to a 740. And when she moved to a 740, she got multiple scholarships, including an 80,000 scholarship from Georgetown. Her dream schools when she was preparing for the test were Kellogg and Wharton. And then with a 650, she couldn't even dream of Kellogg. She actually is currently studying over there. And again, you can actually Google these names. You can get to their LinkedIn profiles overall, and you can see those guys over there. Here's an example of a student who got into not just one school, but every school that she applied to. She got into Harvard, Stanford, Kellogg, Wharton, and Instead. In fact, we'll be doing a seminar with her in a couple of weeks or so, where she'll talk about how GMAT preparation, how she got into all these schools, and her time at Harvard. Okay, and this is a quote from her. She said, and this is from her debrief. She said, "I firmly believe you should have your own customized strategy as per your needs. While you can learn from other strategy, you should make your own. And over the course of your preparation, be flexible enough to adapt." I could not agree more with her. Also, she's a student of MySA Review, which is one of our admission consulting partners, and they were kind enough to allow us to post her success story, her actually not just her GMAT journey, but also her interview preparation as well as her application preparation tips. So you guys can watch that interview, and you guys can also read how she went about doing that. So, what are the benefits of a high GMAT score? First, admission into the school of your choice. If you're aiming for a Kellogg, if you're aiming for a Wharton, if you're aiming for a Harvard, or an MIT or a Berkeley Haas, and you get there over the course of 10 years, just the enthusiasm with which you approach things is easily $500,000 worth of ROI. Scholarship today is actually about $150,000, or a full fellowship. And that's something that hits you right then and there. For those of you who want to work on corporate strategy and marketing, if you have a high GMAT score, that's priceless. Why? Because the guy sitting in front of you who's going to interview you most likely will have a very similar GMAT score. And when you get into that interview room and you really say, hey, and the guy sees that on your resume, you'll have that respect for you even before you speak the first word. I've experienced that firsthand. And if you want to have a backup career as a GMAT expert, that's a very lucrative career as well. So, what are the benefits of a high GMAT score? Super high return on investment. It gives you confidence. And even though it's valid for just 5 years, it stays with you forever. So, let's now transition into learning a bit more about the test, which is how do you ace the test? And to do that, we're going to come back to these terms that we talked about, accuracy versus ability. Remember, accuracy is the number of percentage of questions that you get correct, regardless of their difficulty level. Ability is your comparative performance or your rank in a particular section. So let's understand how the GMAT works and the concept of ability versus accuracy on the test. And to do that, we're going to simulate an adaptive test for two particular students. So student 1 is the blue line, student 2 is the other line at the bottom over here. So student 1, or case 1 as is written over here, solves the first question, gets it right. The first question is always of a median difficulty level or around about there. Then gets the second question, which is slightly more difficult, solves it correctly. Gets a third question, which is even more difficult, makes a mistake over there. Solves the next question, which is slightly easier. And if you were to really say how easy it is, you can really draw horizontal lines over here, and you can see it's the difficulty level between question 2 and question 3. So just for clarity, on the y-axis we have difficulty level. The higher you go on y-axis, the more difficult a particular question becomes. Let me remove this. Gets the fifth question, slightly higher difficulty level, gets that wrong as well. Student 2 gets the first question, median difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the second question, which is of a lower difficulty level, gets that right. Gets the third question, which is of a higher difficulty level, gets that wrong. Gets the fourth question, lower difficulty level, gets that right. Gets the fifth question right as well. Now, both of these students have gotten 3 out of 5 questions correct. Who do you think is doing better? Let me just put in a poll question. Let me just reopen the poll and bring the poll question over here. Who do you think is doing better? Is it student 1 or student 2? All right, 3, 2. Let's get a few more responses. The question is, who do you think is doing better, student 1 or student 2? And I'm going to put in my next poll question, which is, what's the reason for that person doing better? You know, whosoever you chose, whether you chose student 1 or student 2, why are they doing better? 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Broadcast the results. 75% of you think student 1 is doing better, 25% think student 2. Okay, that's good. Okay. And we have 20 responses so far as to why one particular student is doing better. Let's get a few more responses. Three, 2, and 1. All right. So those who've said the student 1 solved higher difficulty question and that's why he's doing better, you guys are absolutely correct. Those who've said since he's not failed on initial questions, or what you've noticed is a pattern but not the causality. And you know, yes, he's done well on initial questions, but that's not the cause. The reason why student 1 is doing better is because he's solved more difficult questions correctly. Okay. Student 1 has solved 5 questions. Each one of those questions has been either at the average difficulty level or above the average difficulty level. Student 2 only got 1 question at the average difficulty level, which was question number 1. Okay. Difficulty matters. Now, here's my question to you, and think about it. Why did student 2 not get served difficult questions? Why did the test not serve difficult questions to student 2? In the open-ended part, why did the test not serve difficult questions to student 2? All right, let me broadcast results. Many of you are seeing because he was making mistakes on easier questions. So essentially, and that's a very important point, because this particular student 2 over here, or case 2, was making mistakes on easier questions. The test said there is no point serving this guy difficult questions, because if you're making mistakes on easier questions, again, easier being a comparative word, you're going to make mistakes on difficult questions as well. So what kind of questions was the test serving this particular student? Again, easy questions. Why? Because the test wanted this particular student to answer questions correctly. Do you guys agree? The reason why this test was serving this particular student easy questions was because the test wanted this guy to answer questions correctly. So on the GMAT, and this is really important to understand, there's a question picking engine. And on the GMAT, this question picking engine is trying to help you improve your accuracy. It pushes the envelope, but at the same time, it also optimizes on making you answer the questions correctly. Because it is trying to improve your accuracy, or what in algorithm terms we really say it's trying to achieve a local maxima of your accuracy. Measuring accuracy on the GMAT when you take a mock test or the actual test is not a great exercise. It actually becomes a very, very futile exercise. Measuring accuracy is a very futile exercise. Why? Because the test by itself, if you make mistakes, is designed to give you easy questions. Okay. So if you want to ace the test, the first challenge you have is to make sure the test serves difficult questions to you. And the second challenge that you have is to make sure that you answer those questions correctly. Roy says, how important is the first question? Roy, the first question is important, but if you're asking that question, if you're balking at it, you're asking the wrong question. Why? Because the first question is going to be of a medium difficulty level, or in general, answering easier questions correctly is more important than answering difficult questions, because otherwise you won't even get difficult questions. So a lot of people really say the first question is super important. I'm going to spend a ton of time on that first question, make sure I get it right. And because they do that, they get it wrong. Okay. The first question doesn't require any special focus. Why? Because, hey, if you have the ability, you will get it right, because that question is a medium difficulty question. Now, this is just a principle that we talked about. Over here, I'm going to show you real data from GMAT Prep. Now, this is an old GMAT Prep when the GMAT Prep used to be a useful test. And the reason why I say it used to be a useful test is because it gave you a lot more insights than what the current GMAT Prep does. Now, the old GMAT Prep had 41 questions, and what you see over here is 2 students. Now, when you compare their attempts, the red rectangles are the question numbers where they made the mistake. This is the verbal section of the GMAT. What you really see is these 2 students are very similar, with the only exception that this particular student 2, has made 2 mistakes over here in the first 2 questions. Now, if you focus just on accuracy, you would really think that these 2 guys would get very similar scores, but the reality is completely different. Student 2, or the guy who made 2 mistakes early on, got a score of V32. Student 1 got a score of V43. V43 is 97th percentile on verbal, or actually 98%, yeah, 97th percentile, sorry. And then V32 is 67th percentile. If you think about it, you say, I make 2 mistakes and I basically get 80,000 students between these 2 students. 7500 ranked and 87,500 ranked means a difference of 80,000 students. GMAT is a super harsh test. How many of you are thinking that way? That GMAT's really, really harsh by making that distinction. Let's get a few more responses. All right, 3. Guys, you are here in this webinar. The best way to get the most out of it is participate. If you get things right, you learn somewhat. If you make a mistake, you learn even more. So get those responses in. No one's judging you. No one who knows you anyway. 3, 2, and 1. The question is GMAT a very harsh exam? %80 of you think GMAT's a really harsh exam. 20% think it isn't. The GMAT is the world's best designed exam over here. When people think it's a really harsh exam, no one really says, hey man, you can still make 9 mistakes and get a 97th percentile. Where does that happen? People don't think about student 1 and say, hey, the guy made 9 mistakes, got a 97th percentile. That's great. I can still make 9 mistakes and get a 97th percentile. People really said 2 more mistakes and I get a V32. And if you're thinking that way, you still don't know the test. The test doesn't care about the number of mistakes you made. What the test cares about is what ability do you demonstrate to the test. Okay, let's kind of map this, and that's where there are no dummy questions on the GMAT prep. Okay, the dummy questions are only on the actual test, not on the GMAT prep. GMAT prep, every question is evaluated. There's no reason to put in a dummy question. But let's see why this happened. And we're going to focus on student 2 here. Now, student 2 got the first question, which was a median difficulty level, got it wrong. Got the second question, which was 30 percentile level, got it wrong. So that is why the third question that the test served to him was that of a 15 percentile level. Now tell me one thing, what is the probability, for those of you who basically said you guys are good in quant, that a particular student is a 90th percentile student and would get a 50th percentile question wrong and a 30th percentile question wrong, one after the other? What is the probability? that a 90th percentile student will get a 50th percentile and a 30th percentile question wrong one after the other. Those who say 0 probably don't understand that probabilities very rarely go to 0. Yes, the probability is less than 1 in 10,000. If you draw the bell curve and essentially do that likelihood and then do the joint likelihood, you're going to find that's less than 1 in 10,000. Okay. You can't be a 90 percentile student and become extra conscious. That's basically saying that Ronaldo is going to miss an open goal with no goalkeeper in there. Okay. It's less than 1 in 10,000. And so for this particular student, the test was actually very right to say, hey, if this guy made these mistakes, he's not a very smart guy. So question number 3 was the 15th percentile, question number 4 was the 25th percentile, 5 was the 30th percentile, 6th was the 40th percentile, 7th was the 55th percentile, 8th, 9th. Student 1, on the other hand, was already getting 90th percentile questions by the time he hit question number 4, and he continued to solve them correctly. Both of these students, e-GMAT students, student 1 actually got a V44 on the actual attempt. Student 2 got a V35, and both of them, student 2 got a 710, student 1 got a 760. Okay. This was GMAT prep. Now I'm going to show you. So the key thing the takeaway that you want to have over here is accuracy is not as important on the test as showing the test that you have the ability. The reason why student 1 got it right was because student 1 got more difficult questions and he answered more of them correctly. Now this was GMAT prep. Now I'm going to show you real GMAT ESR, which each one of you can download. Here's an example of a student who improved from a 520, a verbal score of 17, to a verbal score of 40. I mean, incredible improvement, going from 16th percentile to 91st percentile on verbal. This guy shared his ESR on GMAT Club, and you guys can go and download it. Okay. What you can really see over here is you got a V40. I have the screenshot over here, and that V40 over here is composed of these ability numbers in SC, CR, and RCN, and this is the URL over here. Now, as you download his ESR, and Komal, you can probably provide this link if there's a question in the Q&A pod. What you're going to find is this guy made a ton of mistakes. Okay. This is how his progression in the test looked like. He did really well in the first 10 questions. Then, he did quite well. He still made 3 mistakes in the next 10. Then after that, he got half the questions wrong and still managed to get a V40. This is the verbal side of the test. Now, the reason why he still got a V40 was because when he started making mistakes, it was only on difficult questions. By the time he went to the 3rd and 4th block, he was just being served difficult questions. Now, a lot of you can learn something from this. How many of you over here were worried about timing? Tell me how many of you are worried saying, hey man, I don't ace the test because timing is an issue for me. Select yes if that's the case. Three, 2, and 1. Here, 83% of you think timing is stopping you. Just look at this guy over here. All he did was he took extra time but proved to the test that he had ability. And the reason why he had ability was because he learned to solve questions in the right manner. After that, he skipped about 5 questions. When I say skipped, randomly marked about 5 questions over here and was still able to get a V40. Had this guy done well in Quant, he would have gotten a 750. Okay. It's your ability that is stopping you from acing the GMAT, not timing. We call this a build, maintain strategy, which means you build your ability, you prove to the test that you have ability in the initial part. The adaptive, engine adapts, tells the test itself that you have high ability, and then it serves you difficult questions. Then you can make mistakes on difficult questions, or you can really randomly mark a few questions. Your score will still not go down. This is not just an isolated case, but there are many such cases that we've seen. Now, Do you remember these guys? We just talked about them where you said GMAT's really a harsh exam. You remember them? Two more mistakes. And do you remember these guys? Yes, no? Can you select yes if you remember them? We just talked about them. Okay. You said you looked at the accuracy and said this guy just scored, had two more mistakes and got a terrible score. Okay. That's not how the GMAT looks at them. GMAT looks at them through a lens of abilities, and these are their abilities over here. The V43 guy had a 95th percentile rank in SC, a 95th percentile rank in CR, and an 87th percentile rank in RC. And the V32 guy had very, very different percentiles. When you look at these people through the lens of ability, do you see that they're very different? They're super different, right? And that's what the GMAT cares about. The GMAT doesn't care about how many questions you get right. It's the difficulty level of questions. So there were two questions here. The first question was, so even if I spend a ton of time, I can get a really good score. In principle, yes. But in reality, that's not going to pan out that way. Why? Because when people make that statement, people have a very huge assumption, which is to really say, hey, if I get a difficult question, instead of spending 2 minutes, if I spend 3 minutes on that question, I'm more likely to answer that correctly. Isn't that how some of you are thinking? Hey, I get a difficult question, and instead of spending 2 minutes, if I spend 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes, my likelihood of answering that question correctly should go up. How many of you think that way? Three, two, and 1. 70% of you think that way. 70% of you are hugely wrong. One of the beauties of running an online test prep company and having the volume of students that we have is you can run amazing number of experiments. So, but 2 years back, we ran this experiment where we said, hey, we're going to give people a mixed quiz. And in quiz, in the first iteration of quiz, and in each of these iterations, about 500 people took this quiz. What we are going to really do is that in the first half of the questions, we're going to put medium questions. In the second half, we're going to put hard questions. And when I say hard, it wasn't all medium, but 70% medium, 30% hard. And the second part, 70% hard, 30% medium. And so we actually sent that quiz through 1,000 people. Then we reversed it. We said we're going to put more hard questions up front because if you're doing that quiz up front, it's a timed quiz. You're going to spend more time on hard questions. What we found was that a hard question in either format remained a hard question, regardless of how much time people spent on it. In the second quiz, when more hard questions were up front, people spent more time on them, but their accuracy on them as a group did not change. The only question which showed a significant difference in accuracy was the last question in the quiz, always, regardless of whether it was easy or hard. The key thing that I'm trying to tell you is that each one of you has what we call as a tuck time, a sweet time to solve a question correctly. If you know how to solve that question, you'd be able to solve it within that time. Beyond that time, if you take longer to answer that question, your likelihood of answering that question doesn't change. In fact, to a certain degree, it comes down. How many of you have really spent a ton of time on questions and really figured out, hey, initially when you marked an answer in 2 minutes, you got it right, but then you said, let me revise that question. And you revised that question, you got confused and you marked the wrong answer despite spending 4 minutes. Right? That happens. And the reason for that is each one of you has that tuck time. If you spend more time, you're going to confuse yourself. So again, we still have that question. Does it mean that that the first few questions are most important? In some ways, yes, but what it means is building ability is way more important. If you have the ability, you're automatically going to get the first few questions right. Okay. And again, I'm going to take an analogy of cricket. If you're playing test match cricket, and forgive me for those of you who don't know cricket as a sport, but if you're playing test match cricket, you may really say that, hey, as a batsman, facing the first few balls is really important, because if you survive the first 5 overs, your likelihood of success goes high. Yes, that is important. But to face the first few balls properly, you should to have a good defensive technique. So what's important is that you have a good defensive technique, because if you have a good defensive technique, your likelihood of getting through those first 5 overs is really important. But if you don't have a good defensive technique, you might go with any mindset. You're not going to survive those first 5 overs. Nikhil says, does that mean that one can bounce back from the wrong first few questions? In principle, yes, but you're not likely to bounce back. Why? Because if you made mistakes in the first few questions, this means you don't have the ability. I mean, you are human. You're not going to become superhuman during the course of 30 minutes and say, man, I had low ability for the first 30 minutes of the test, and then suddenly I'm going to get a boost of ability somewhere during the test. No, that doesn't happen. And Varun says, so should I focus on getting the first few questions correct so that I can maintain my ability? No, Varun, you should focus on building your ability while you are studying. And if you build your ability while you're studying, then automatically the first few questions would be correct. Does that make sense? If you have 80th percentile ability and you get a 50th percentile question, you're not going to make a mistake if you have 80th percentile ability. But if you have 40th percentile ability and you get a 50th percentile question, you can spend an eternity on it. You're still going to make a mistake. You're still more likely to make a mistake. So the key thing that I want you guys to take away is build ability. Mohit says, and suppose the test gives the first question on a topic which you don't really know well. Won't it be unfair? That's just the first question. Yes, you made a mistake. You'll come back from that if you have ability. But by the way, that first question is still going to be of a medium difficulty level. So unless and until you've completely left a topic and you've not taken mock tests. I mean, here's the thing, right? Certain things that we know about the test. The first question, only in 10% of the cases would be a reading comprehension question. In the other 90%, it's going to be SC or CR. Similarly, only in 3% of the cases in the quant side, the first question is going to be a probability question. You know that. But yes, if you go into the quant section without studying number properties, man, you're making a mistake. You might skip probability. You should not skip number properties. So the key thing which is there is acing the GMAT's all about ability. Okay. Timing, exam strategy, and choosing which questions and stamina and to attempt and building that stamina, they're important, but they're secondary. Okay. Varun has another question. He says, I heard people say that they got first in questions in all RCs and then they got lost a lot of time because of that. So, Varun, remember one thing, when you hear people crying, the reason why people cry is because they haven't seen others do that. So you may hear a couple of instances of that, but that's not very common. Okay. The second thing which is there is if you get first in questions all RC and if you've studied properly, you know how much time you need to take RC. Okay, and you spend that amount of time on it, which is what we call as your tuck time. We actually tell you what that tuck time is as you practice in our platform. And you spend that amount of time, and that's okay. Then you'll spend slightly longer on the first 10 questions, but you won't get that many RCs later on. So it's not that you're going to falter later on the test. Ultimately, you're only going to get 12 to 13 RC questions. If the first 10 are all RCs, then congratulations, you're not going to get very many RCs later on. Does that make sense? Now, this chart over here is also really important. Why I tell people to take the Sigma X mock. Why? Because what you really see over here is that essentially the GMAT measures ability, and when it comes to mock tests, there's no mock test in the world that has independent ability engines. On the GMAT, your ability engines are independent. Okay. So as Akshay says, does abilities in RC section determine the ability of SC section? No, it doesn't. These are three individual independent ability engines. Unfortunately, when you take a Manhattan test or a Veritas prep, they do not have independent ability engines. Only the Sigma X mock has independent ability engines. And that's why, when you take a Manhattan test, you don't get an SC ability, you don't get a CR ability, you don't get an RC ability. Why? Because those engines don't exist. And you don't get the right kind of starting points for you. Those tests are really, really good if you are more or less have equal ability in each of these sections. But if you're naturally better in one and worse off in the other, then those tests will give you a very incorrect assessment of what your starting point is. Bad starting point leads to bad study plans, leads to inefficient preparation. Sigma X mock will tell you each of your ability scores. So essentially, acing the test is about building ability. Everything else is secondary. Okay. So how do you measure ability? But before that, I want to make sure that you guys understand how GMAT's different from a few other non-adaptive tests. How many of you heard of the CAT, which is an Indian equivalent of the GMAT? So if you haven't heard of it, it's a non-adaptive test. It's a linear test where you get questions and you get to solve questions. But 85% of you have heard of the CAT. And the reason why I have this slide is because a lot of people have heard of it and a lot of people have prepared for the CAT and they think that preparing for the GMAT the way they prepared for the CAT is going to work and they falter big time while doing that. And I'll tell you why that is the case. Why is it that preparing for the GMAT has to be very different? So the tests are completely different and they test different things. On the CAT, what really happens is you get a particular section, you get a large pool of questions. No one can do all the questions. So you have to choose which question to solve. So you get a few easy questions, you get a few medium questions, and you get a few hard questions. And the key to acing the test is to make sure that you select the easiest questions first, select the medium difficulty questions next, and then select the hard questions towards the end. Okay. The choice on the computer adaptive test, you don't get the choice. A question is served to you, you've got to solve it right then and there. You can't go back and so on and so forth. On the CAT, every question carries equal marks. So the best way to score as high as possible is to answer as many questions correctly. And so that's why choosing the easiest questions first is really important. On the GMAT, a difficult question carries 3 times as many points as an easy question does. Am I correct about the CAT? Those of you who know about the CAT, the column on the left outlines how CAT works. Yeah. You have to figure out how to select the right question and how to answer it as quickly as possible. Because no one can answer all the questions on the CAT. Actually, answering difficult questions on the CAT is considered stupidity. Why? Because focus on the easy questions, you're less likely to make a mistake, you're more likely to really solve it quickly. So people who study for the CAT, they really say, I'm going to take 15 plus mock tests. Why? Because I'm going to perfect my test taking strategies. And that's the right way to ace the CAT. But when it comes to the GMAT, it's not a test of your test taking strategies. It's a test of your ability. You don't need 15 mocks. 5 mocks, if you built your ability, are plenty. Okay. So the key to studying for the GMAT is building ability. And if you are someone who's coming from that CAT study background, who's prepared using a CAT material, who's really saying, I'm going to learn all of these tricks and I'm going to figure out how to do the easy questions correctly, that's not going to work on the GMAT. You're going to waste a lot of money taking tests many times. And that's really important for you. So the question really is, how do you measure ability? Take sigma x mock. That will give you an excellent way to measuring ability, okay, in a reliable and consistent manner. The other way, if you're an e-GMAT student, is our Rhenium platform. Now, when you take a mock test, you've still got to measure ability. You've got to attempt both quant and verbal sections. Early on, someone was asking, can I just attempt the quant section? Yes, we have a quant ability quiz in Rhenium or a verbal ability quiz in Rhenium. Or SCCR and RC ability quizzes. So when you buy our GMAT online course, you get Rhenium platform and you get our Sigma X mocks. And in this Rhenium platform, you get 30 ability quizzes in verbal and about 40 odd ability quizzes in quant in all, in addition to the 5 mocks. I mean, that's equivalent to, if you really want to put it that way, that's equivalent to getting 20 plus mocks. But the beauty of this is you can study for the SC section, take an ability quiz right there, it'll tell you that score. Study for the CR section, take an ability quiz. You don't need to sit through, a 4-hour long ordeal. And it gives you those analytics that help you improve from that 50th percentile. And that's one reason why Rhenium is the highest rated assessment platform on GMAT Club. It's rated higher than GMAT Prep mock test. Here's an example of a student who improved from a Q35 to a Q50 and a V36 to a V42 using analytics. Carrie wanted to aim for Harvard, Stanford, and Wharton, but that Q35 can't even dream of those schools. Good in verbal, but to get to a 750, you've got to get better. And as you watch her interview, you can really see how she used data how she used the course to improve from Q35 to Q47 and then use Rhenium, the data from there, to refine to a Q50. And this was done in 3 weeks. Focus study, 3 weeks. Again, this was focus study, but it's possible in 3 weeks. And which is why I said Rhenium, highest rated assessment test on GMAT Club. And then it's because of the quality of questions, the quality of analytics, and the quality of solutions that we provide. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about strategy in context of the GMAT. We've talked about GMAT Planner, which allows you to create your study plans for various profiles. We've talked about why GMAT's important, not just to get admission, but to get scholarships and so on and so forth. We've also talked about the relationship between GMAT and ability. Then there was a question, how do you build ability? So we'll look at the importance of core skills and how do you make sure that you continue to learn and continue to improve. So let's talk about core skills. Why are they important? And to do that, I'm going to actually have you solve a quant question. Here are the answer choices. It's a simple, at a medium difficulty level word problem question. I'm going to give you 2 minutes to solve this. Here is the question. I'm going to mute.
All right. Last 5 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. As I said, medium difficulty question, but 80% of you got it right. And that's kind of the power of stats around it. Choice B is indeed the correct answer. Now, the key thing over here is, how did you solve this question? And I'm going to give you the 3 options. One is by making equations, the second is through number substitution, and the third is by using a formula or so. How did you solve this question? All right, 83% of you really said by making equations, and 17% said number substitution. Now, there was a question early on, and the reason why I asked this question is because someone asked, how do you build ability? The way you build ability is by making sure that your brain's trained to solve a question in a particular manner, and that process is essentially a solid process. So for many of you, the moment you see, Jacob's not 12 years younger than Michelle, you can really say, hey, your brain starts to form this equation, m is equal to j plus 12. Does that happen for you guys? The moment you read the statement, you translate that into equations, right? And your brain's wired to doing this. How many of you can do the same thing when it comes to a sentence correction question? For how many of you is your brain wired to really say, hey, this is the meaning, these are the errors, and then let me just go and figure out the correct answers? Not really. You've got to build that wiring, and that's how you build ability. And that's where following a standard process becomes really, really important. Okay. So, and to how do you build that wiring? You build that wiring by building certain core skills. Now, what are the core skills for a question such as this? You can also see the solution for those of you who made a mistake. You need to first make sure you know how to work with variables. You need to be able to convert statement into equations. You need to relate them. And you need to be able to solve equations, right? At a very high level, these are the 4 core skills that exist with regards to solving a question such as this one. Now, let me ask another poll question. Has anyone ever suffered what we call as a score plateau? And I'll tell you what a score plateau is. Let's say you started studying for the GMAT, you put in the first 80 hours, and your score improves as you study. Now, a point comes where you're putting in hours, but your score doesn't seem to budge. It just doesn't change. You still keep on making the same kind of mistakes, and so on and so forth. But essentially, your score, it seems it's hit a wall. The score improvement doesn't go beyond a certain point. Has anyone experienced that? 90+% of you have experienced that. That's what we call as a score plateau. I'll tell you why that happens. And then let me take an example of something which is as simple as this, and then we'll take a complex example. Let's say you were weak in in the second core skill, which is converting statements into equations, and you kept on practicing. How do you solve equations? You kept on making yourself better at it, because apparently that's where you felt you were making a mistake. What's going to happen? Are you going to improve in word problems? Are you going to improve? Yes, no? No, not at all. Your score will remain there. Okay? And that's what happens with a lot of you. Now, many of you would be thinking, okay, I understand this exists in word problems. I understand this may exist on Quant. But how many of you are wondering, how can such neatly defined core skills exist on the verbal side of things? How many of you are wondering? Hey, does that happen on the verbal side? Do such neatly defined course goals exist over there? Okay, many of you are wondering that. Now, little fuzzy rules. Let's talk about how fuzzy they are. So the short answer is yes, they do. They are as neatly defined as the course goals on Quant. And I'm going to prove that to you as we solve a bold-faced question. But before we solve a bold-faced question, let me tell you what do third graders learn in the US. So I live in Phoenix, Arizona. I have a daughter who is now going to turn 12 this year. Now, 6 years back, I was looking for a school for her, and the nice thing about this is that schools over here allow you to just walk through classrooms and learn about what they're studying. So this is what a third grader was learning, and then it came to reading comprehension. How do you do compare and contrast? How do you figure out author's purpose? How do you do cause and effect reasoning? How do you differentiate between fact and opinion? How do you make inferences? How do you get to the main idea of a passage and differentiate the details? How do you draw conclusions? The strategies that they were using were by making connections while reading, by doing predictive reading through keywords, by asking questions, by summarizing what they had read and visualizing that information. Our daughter could really figure out the difference between fact and opinion when they were in fourth grade, when she was in fourth grade. And not because we taught her, we don't have time to teach her, but because everyone in her class knows. Again, when did you build the core skills for word problems? In which grade? Probably fifth or sixth. That's the same time when natives build their core skills for verbal. Did you guys build these core skills while you were growing up? Or rather, how many of you did that? Okay. But the good thing is, because it's a fairly logical exam, if you put in the effort, you can build those core skills. And let's kind of think about the logic aspect of it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another question to solve. It's a bold-faced question. Um, some of you may not like this, but essentially give it your best attempt. I'm going to give you 4 minutes to solve this question. So you guys will have ample time. Don't rush through this. Okay. Here's the bold-faced question. And I'll give you 4 minutes. Select the best answer. All right, guys, last 15 seconds. Get those responses in. Three, two, and one. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. I must say, you know, what you can really see over here is that choice C really popular. 50% of the class thinks that's the best choice. Choice D really popular. Choice E very popular as well. Choices A and B not so popular. So I mean, as a group, you guys are smarter than the average group that I deal with. That's wonderful. So let's look at another short answer question. How did he approach this question? Let me put in a short answer poll over here where you can type your response. How did he approach solving this question? All right, understood the question, made connections between two sentences, identified premises, focused on the bolded text, eliminated the ones that found completely wrong, premise, conclusion, counterpoint, read and understand, elimination. Okay, so there's a lot. Each one of you has some method or the other. May not agree with many of those methods, but there is a method which is good to begin with. That's really, really good. So let's see how we do solve these questions at e-GMAT. Okay. We first, when we in a bold-faced question, you always get an argument, and essentially what we do is we identify the conclusion and we identify whether each statement's a fact or a claim. Once you identify the conclusion, once you classify the statements, you create what we call as a logical structure of the argument, which is, hey, what does each statement do? What role does each statement play with regards to the main conclusion? Then we pre-think the roles played by the bolded statements. We actually just focus on those and we create a specific structure in which we do pre-thinking. And then all we need to do is compare and contrast against the option statements, and then POV becomes a piece of cake. So let's analyze it. Let's do that. And as you do this, I'm going to go through a couple of advanced things which probably are not tested on this question, but are tested on questions as they get to a 700 level question. The first statement says stock prices of companies that exceed $100 billion in revenue, also called ELCs, rarely beat the market over a 5-year period. What do you have? This is a fact or an observation about ELCs. Let's call this fact A. Then it says it is commonly thought that this happens because the company is too big to grow faster than the overall market. So when you look at this statement, if I were to ask a majority of what this entire statement is, you would say it's a claim. And the reason why you would say that is because you look at the bolded portion, you say that is a claim, and you say this entire statement is a claim, but that's not true. This entire statement is a fact. Just the bolded part or the underlined part is a general belief or a claim, which is written to explain why does fact A happen. Or people explain fact A by really saying this happens because the company is too big to grow faster than the overall market. Say, hey man, you're too big to grow, you can't grow fast enough. Now, some of you may be confused. Why is it that you have the entire statement as a fact, whereas you have an opinion embedded in there? How can that happen? How can the entire statement be a fact with an opinion embedded in there? How many of you are confused about that? No one is? Okay, quite a few of you are. If there were no one, I would have just skipped that. So now, by definition, let's kind of look at that. What is a fact? Fact is something which you take as given, something that's not questioned in the context of the argument. An opinion is someone's belief or what someone thinks. By definition, an opinion is always questionable, whether it's an author's opinion or a third party's opinion. And in common language, not so much in GMAT lingo, but if you say it's 15 degrees outside, it's a fact, it's a data point, it's a verifiable number. And someone says it's cold outside, that's an opinion. Why? Hey, a South Indian and a Finnish guy may have different opinions of what's cold. I once was in Finland when I lived in Europe, and I traveled to Finland, and I was sitting in a cab, and the cab driver said it's really warm outside. I turned the AC up, and I was freezing in the car. Just I'm not a South Indian, but again, just this opinions vary based on what someone thinks. Okay, so opinions are always questionable, facts are not questionable. Now, when you think of this statement, according to Business Week, Wharton's better than Harvard, and you really look at this statement in this entirety, and if the author tells you, according to Business Week, Wharton's better than Harvard, you're not going to question that. Why? Because you're not going to question whether Business Week said something or not, because the author is telling you, hey, as per Business Week, Wharton is indeed better than Harvard. What you can question though is whether, in your opinion, whether Wharton's actually better than Harvard or not. That is questionable. So when you look at this statement in the entirety, according to Business Week, you call that a fact because you're not going to question that. But when you look at the bolded part, whether Wharton's better than Harvard, that becomes an opinion. Why? Because, hey, it's questionable. Does that make sense? Kinda? Why kind of? It should make complete sense. The other way, for those of you who are, what's the definition of a sentence? What's the definition of a sentence? Just the grammar part. What is the definition of a sentence? Something that expresses a complete thought. Who said that? That's wonderful. A sentence must have a verb and a noun, but essentially it is an independent clause or a clause that makes sense. So whenever you rarely see something which is an independent thought, you can classify it as a fact or an opinion. So when you look at this entire piece over here, starting with according to Business Week, that entire piece is an independent thought, but when you look at just this, Wharton's better than Harvard, that also is an independent clause, or it really presents a thought. So you can classify this separately as well. Okay, so this is a complex sentence, or what we call it technically as a compound sentence in the grammar terms, and this is a simplistic independent clause over here. And whenever you have that structure, you can classify both of them independently. Does that make sense? For those of you who know the grammar side of things, if you don't know, then go through the foundation aspect of our SC course. Okay, all right. So in the same way, it is commonly thought that this happens because the company is too big to grow faster than the overall market. You're not going to dispute whether it's commonly thought or not. Why? Because the author is telling you it is commonly thought. Okay. What you can dispute again is whether this company is indeed too big to grow faster than the overall market. So again, the entire statement is a fact. The underlined portion is a general belief, which is written to explain fact A. Then you have a third statement starting with the word however. However, studies show that ELCs that provide higher return than the market, majority of them are run by their founders. So what do we get? We get two more facts right now. One is, the first statement tells us that there is this group of ELCs that provide higher return than the market. Now, remember, we are not talking about all ELCs. Okay. Whenever you see a relative pronoun such as which or that in a critical reasoning question, start reading slowly. Why? Because a relative pronoun has a segmentation impact or has a grouping impact. And what this really shows is that there's this group of ELCs over here, when you look at this, that provides higher return than the market. And that for that group of ELCs, a majority of them are run by their founders. So what are the two facts? One is that there are exceptions to statement number one over here, and B, there is a certain commonality to that exception or characteristic that's common to most of those exceptions, that a majority of them are run by their founders. Then the author says, since most ELCs are run by professional management that is inherently risk averse. Okay, there's another fact about ELCs in general. Prior to this, we did not know that, most of the ELCs, the larger set of ELCs is run by professional management, and we did not know that professional management is inherently risk averse. The study's findings strongly suggest that the real reason why most TLCs don't beat the market is not that they're too big to grow, but rather that they're run by professional management that is too risk averse. So this is the author's conclusion. This is also the claim that the author is making. A conclusion is always a claim by definition. And when you look at the content of this conclusion refutes the accepted belief. What is the accepted belief about ELCs? What's the accepted belief about ELCs? What is the accepted belief about ELCs? Too big to grow, slow growth. Yes, they don't grow. That they can't grow because of their size. Accepted belief about ELCs is not they're run by founders. That's not the accepted belief. The accepted belief is that they are too big to grow. This part over here. That's the common belief. Okay. So just simply, I think you guys understand this. The last statement is the author's conclusion. Statement number 4 is something which it's a data point that supports the author's conclusion. Statement 3 is also a data point that supports the author's conclusion. The boldface makes the author's conclusion believable. Why? Because this piece that a majority of the ELCs that beat the market, the fact that they're run by founders, makes us believe in the author's conclusion that that ELCs can grow faster than the overall market. And the reason why a good number of them do not grow is because they're probably run by professional management that is too risk averse. Statement 1 is a general fact on which belief about ELCs is based, and statement 2 is the common belief or houses the common belief that is refuted by the author. Take a look at this. Everyone's clear with the structure of the argument? It's simple so far. So let's do a pre-thinking now. What is statement number 1? Statement number 1 is essentially a characteristic of the company companies that buck the trend. When you look at this, a majority of them are run by their founders. It's a characteristic of a company companies that buck the trend. It is a fact which is provided to support the author's conclusion. Statement number 2 is what the author believes as the reason for the observed trend. It's also the alternate explanation that the author favors. Pre-thinking, clear to everyone? Okay, now let's kind of do the option analysis and figure out the correct answer. Statement 1 says, hey, the first is a claim, the accuracy of which is at issue in the argument. Is the first statement a claim run by their founders? Is that a claim? No, absolutely not. Okay. Do we doubt the accuracy of first? Do we really doubt the accuracy of this thing? Whether a majority of them are run by their founders or not? No, we don't doubt the accuracy. Nowhere in the argument do we doubt this accuracy. Because these things are wrong, statement 1 is absolutely wrong. Okay. Then let's go to statement 5. The first provides evidence to refute what? An explanation that the argument favors. Another word for an explanation that the argument favors, an explanation is a claim, is conclusion. So what choice E for element is saying is, the first provides evidence to refute the conclusion. Does the first go against the conclusion? Yes or no? No, it doesn't go against the conclusion, because of which choice E is also incorrect. E for elephant. Then let's go to choice D, D for delta. The first provides evidence. Okay, evidence is fine. So all of this is data point can be evidence that has been used to support something. What? An explanation that the argument challenges. Which explanation does the argument challenge, guys? Can you tell me? Which explanation does the argument challenge? Too big to grow. Now, does the first, good, does the first support that explanation? No, it doesn't support that explanation. And that part is wrong. Because of that mistake, choice D is also incorrect. Then let's come to the correct answer choice. Okay. The first is evidence. Okay, what kind of evidence? That has been used to support something. What? An explanation that the argument favors. So this part is correct. This part is correct. This part is correct. The second is that explanation. That is correct too, which is what makes choice C as your correct choice. Now, someone's saying, do we get enough time to do this analysis? Absolutely. If you understand what's the difference between a fact and a claim, if you understand how to draw the structure of an argument, you will do this in 2 minutes or less. You know, we wouldn't have 1800 plus reviews on GMAT Club if these methods did not work. That's why I said you've got to build those connections. If you do this analysis, it's very similar to the kind of analysis you guys did with the word problems. You read a statement, you made you actually created an equation out of it. This is very, very similar. I am not, Lauren, I'm not going to, a fact is something that you don't question. A claim in general is something that's always questionable. A claim is something that someone says, whether it's the author or someone's opinion. But if you go through the boldface concept file and the application files in the free trial, you'll get a much better idea of what a fact and claim is. Remember, we spent 8 hours teaching boldface. I can't teach boldface in 20 minutes over here. The reason why we did this was to make sure to tell you the core skills that exist in questions such as this. Okay. But if you log into your free trial, you go through the boldface concept files, you'll be able to really see that. Or if you're a paid student and a GLP student, we have the boldface session tomorrow, a 3-hour session in which we'll just do boldface. So, what are the core skills that are used in a question such as this? The first thing is the ability to classify a statement, whether it's a fact, a belief, an observation, a principle, a conclusion, and so on and so forth. The second is, how does that statement relate to the conclusion or main point? We saw strengthening versus weakening over here. Okay. The third is, how do the bolded statements relate to one another? The correct answer actually said that, choice C. And choice D is, the answer choices are worded in a complex fashion. Whether you have the ability to evaluate them segment by segment, clause by clause, and really correct and really mark whether that makes sense or not. Okay. Where do you learn this? You can really see it in portions of the e-GMAT course, where you learn these things, and each portion has its own role to help you teach that. But the key thing which is there is, can you really see that these core skills are as neatly defined as the core skills in word problems? Can you see that? Now I'm going to show you where you make mistakes. Why do you make a mistake? These are all the incorrect answer choices, and the portions in red are the ones where you made the mistake. The first is a claim. Focuses on your ability to classify a statement. The accuracy of which is at issue in the argument is about the logical structure of the argument. The first is an objection. Again, classification of a statement that has been raised against the position defended in the argument. That is again the logical structure of the argument. The first is evidence. This is choice D. Is purely around the logical structure and the linkages between the two statements. And choice E, again, is the logical structure of the argument. So when you make a mistake, the reason you make a mistake is because you falter on that core skill. And if you understand that, that which core skill did you falter on, you can fix that. And if you fix that, you are definitely bound to improve. But people who get stuck, they get stuck because they don't know which core skill to work on. Do you agree? Can you really see that if you focus on these core skills, you would not hit that score plateau? I'm going to give you the PDF, guys, so because I want to make sure we finish the webinar. So I want to summarize this and overall. Essentially, when you're starting your preparation, have a really good idea of how much time you need. And again, one of the things which is the hardest for us is people come to us and say, I have my GMAT in a year, in a month. My current score is 550. Can you help me get a 750? And my answer to that is only if you study full time. But by the way, I can only put 2 hours a day. Can you help me do that somehow? No, it doesn't really happen. You've got to spend that time. I can give you all the course material. You still have to learn it yourself. You have to internalize it. You have to build those processes. You have to do things the right way. I'll give you all the tools. I'll address your concerns, but it's you who has to put in time. And that's the first calculation you need to do. If you do not have that time, make time. Then create that personalized study plan. Understand the areas of major effort. And when you understand it, really understand it, what it means is people really say, okay, I'm at 70 percentile in reading comprehension, and I'm at 20 percentile in SC. And you know, when you're at 20 percentile in SC, the way you start studying SC, the kind of focus that you need for that is very different from the kind of focus that you need in RC, because you're already at a pretty good level. But they don't understand the implication of those ability numbers, and they really say they start studying SC in the same manner that they started RC. No, because you're at a lower ability, you need more focus. You need to get off the ground over there. Someone really asked this question, hey, should I just study through OG first and then worry about your course? OG is not a learning resource. It will not teach you core skills. OG is a good practice resource. You know, it's a must, but it's not enough. It's necessary, but not sufficient. Not for 99% of you over there. If you're at a 700 level, you don't need any course. Or in other words, if you're at 85th percentile in both quant and verbal, probably just having the OG is good enough. But if you are at 70th percentile in either one, you need a course. The other piece which people don't do is they don't measure their progress every 30 to 40 hours. They don't look at data to figure out where they need to work on. And that's really important. So let's see essentially why we say that acing the GMAT is very predictable. Here's the structure of the test. Okay, your GMAT score is built on your quant and verbal scores. Then your verbal score is built on these independent abilities, and your quant score is built on these independent abilities. Essentially, this test is very logical. If you have your abilities at these grassroots levels, I can predict your verbal and quant scores. I can predict your GMAT score. Okay, this isn't rocket science. And if you measure this improvement at these grassroots levels, you can really predict how much improvement have you added. Okay, we do this. We understand this architecture and we track your improvement. A lot of people ask, hey, what's the average score improvement that you have? An average e-GMATer improves by about 120 points, you know, if they work with us on both quant and verbal. And the reason why the improvement in quant's lower than that on verbal is because, hey, a lot of people come to us at a Q44. There isn't enough headroom to improve in quant. But if you come at a Q35, you to improve those 100 points. We track this. There's a reason we guarantee this with our live courses. You know, a total of 14 points of raw score improvement guarantee. No one does that in the industry. And that guarantee doesn't end at a 650. There are people who start at 700, buy our courses and improve to 750. Okay. The beauty of this is when you're studying, you're not just studying and thinking, okay, I'm going to take a mock test and improve. When you're studying SC, we give you the tool to measure that improvement in SC. When you're studying CR, we give you the tools to measure that improvement. And this is something that no one else has built. If you go and take a look at the e-GMAT team, what you're going to find is you're going to find full-time experts. You're going to find full-time technologists. You're going to find full-time e-learning, a full-time e-learning team, a full-time GMAT strategy team. If you go and compare the structure of any of the other companies, you're not going to find these people. You're going to see a lot of people listed. 90% of them would have another primary job. 90% of them work only 8 hours. At e-GMAT, everyone who's there works full-time, actually more than full-time. So how is this different from a traditional test prep? What's the architecture of a traditional test prep? You study using books, 80% of that learning happens over there. Then you go to a classroom and you kind of learn 20% of your learning happens over there. And then you take mock tests. Essentially learning concepts, learning application, and evaluation. When you go through books, 1,000 people go through books in 1,000 different degrees. Books don't give you feedback. When you go to a classroom, if you get a good instructor, that's wonderful. But essentially, even then, they don't have the tools to measure your improvement. When you come to one of our paid sessions, everyone gets feedback. Right now, it's a free session. I can't give feedback to everyone, but in paid sessions, everyone gets feedback. And that's personalized to them. We do a lot of what-if analysis because through Adobe Connect, the way you see we had polls, we have 4 to 5 times as many polls in a paid session overall, and that's where we just figure out, can you figure out what the main conclusion is? Have you thought about the strengthener or not, and so on and so forth. Now when you look at a traditional test prep, where is the alignment with that of the GMAT? Only at this level. Okay, beyond that there's no other assessment at the SCCR and RC level, and even when you're preparing, there's very little feedback. Essentially, when you go through traditional test prep, you take mock tests, you realize you're still far off, you're very frustrated, and a lot of people just give up. Anyone who's gone through a traditional test prep, have you guys experienced this? Thinking, I thought I was studying really well, spent a month and a half, and realized I'm getting nowhere. That happens, right? And then you go through the cycle again, Many of you give up, others improve after going through it 3 to 4 times or so. When we build this platform, and I will tell you this, we are technologists and who love education. And the goal really was to provide everyone a private tutor at the price of a book. And that's where we said we've got to have full-time technology folks working on this and iterating on this. Another thing that you would really notice is we just do the GMAT. We don't do the GRE. Why? Because we're still perfect in the GMAT. As per us, we may be the most reviewed company. We still are not the perfect company. Why? Because there's constant improvement that we see based on the data that we get. But there's one core architecture that has been there right from the very inception. We said we're not going to just teach you concepts. We're going to teach you concepts and teach you application together. You're not going to study subject, verbs, pronouns, and so on and so forth, and then in the end you're going to solve questions. You're going to learn how to solve questions the moment you study subject, verb, the moment you study verbs, the moment you study pronouns, the moment you study inference and assumption and evaluate and so on and so forth. And this is how it's morphed over here. We talked about this early on in the webinar. So how is this architecture aligned with that of the GMAT? The alignment is not just at the level of sentence correction, but also at the level of modifiers, also at the level of inference, also at the level of assumption or main point, or even odd, or in general word problems in percents and other pieces. And you get feedback at each one of these levels. If you perfect here, and here, there's no reason why you won't perfect here. There's no reason why you won't score good here, or you won't get a good score on the test. The key over here is that you don't get to that 90th percentile just by studying. If you can't have that attitude, you need to focus on perfecting, and perfecting happens at these grassroots points, and that's what the architecture enables you to do. Here's an example of a student. I mean, we've shown many success stories, but who went from really a pathetic score in sentence correction to actually 99th percentile. Her name is Ria. She actually is going to start her, she got admitted into ISB's YLP program. She'll start studying later this year. So how do we enable perfection? Through 3 things. One is the process. When we teach you the concepts, when we teach you the application, give you the feedback on both concepts and application, and make sure that you practice right then and there. The second is insights. Insights through what? Through these feedbacks, through the ability quizzes and Scholar Rhenium. And the third is that personalization of your learning, starting from your study plan to the skill data part, to the fact that we have a custom quiz engine in which you can create 10,000 different kinds of quizzes. And here's an example of how that personalization works. This is the verbs module, and you really appreciate the insights. What you really see over here is this is the end of the module. The guy took a practice quiz. So again, you're learning concepts, you're learning application, you're learning more advanced concepts over here, and then learning application. So this guy took a practice quiz and he said, hey, this is a low score over here. What could be causing this low score? The first point, sequencing seems to be an issue. Second point, application seems to be an issue. You go back, fix the sequencing, fix the application, you're golden in verb. Okay. But doing that, you can go from that 60th percentile in verbs to that 90th percentile in just 1 hour. These are insights that are personalized to you. Try getting them from a private tutor. You'll spend $100 just to get these insights. Again, it's not just about videos. It's about the architecture. It's about the data that you get. It's about what you do with that data. With that, we've come to the end of the webinar. Again, start with taking a Sigma X mock, creating your own strategy, and understand how much effort you need. Okay. Lastly, focus on learning application. And you can write to me in case you need help defining your strategy. Here's my email address. With that, we've come to the end of this webinar. Here are the session files. And if you guys can give me some feedback on the webinar in the short answer pod, that would be really good. As the course calendar as well. And yes, you'd get the recording of this webinar today evening. So today evening my time, Sunday morning, those of you who are in India, 1 a.m. for those of you who are in Europe. When are the classes beginning? The classes are beginning next week. So you do need to enroll about 3 days in advance to make sure that you go through the prerequisites properly. The fees, we can go to our website and check the fees out. Komal, if you would be nice enough to provide the fee information. Rakesh says, I'm not able to score high on verbal, not able to handle anxiety. How do you cope with that? Rakesh, the reason why you're not able to handle anxiety is because you're thinking about the next question. The reason you're thinking about the next question is because you don't have a process to answer questions. Once you have a process to answer questions, you will start solving questions consistently. Once you start solving questions consistently, what you're going to find is the anxiety is reduced tremendously. So let me just sequence this for you. One, have a process to solve questions. Always follow that process, because if you always follow that process, you're going to find that you're not worrying about how the hell will I solve this. You're going to worry about, okay, what is the meaning? What is the statement saying? And so on and so forth. The second, when you start doing the process, you're going to have high accuracy. When you have high accuracy, anxiety goes down automatically. Okay. You're not going to become complete questions on time, Rakesh. Again, start following the process. Improvement will happen. And if you are an e-GMAT student, go through the Your GMAT Roadmap course. You'll see a lesson specifically on time management. Okay, can I talk about classes and timing? Yes, I can. So what would you like to know, Mithun, about classes and timing? I'll be happy to talk about how long they are. Okay, you download the batch calendar over here which says course calendar. You'll get the classes. But remember, the classes are only about 10 to 15% of the learning. The other 80% of that learning happens on the online platform. Every class is between 2 and 2.5 hours long. They happen on weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays at 7 a.m. Pacific. 7 a.m. Pacific, it's 7:30 p.m. IST. It's 3 p.m. UK. Okay. Prashant says, why do the classes take place just on weekends? The classes take place just on weekends, and there's an overlap with quant and verbal because we expect people to just study quant and verbal. As you saw earlier, 90% of you are working professionals. If you are working professionals, you can't put in, you'll be hard pressed to put in more than 2 hours per day. And if you're studying 2 hours per day and studying new content, you can't say, I'm going to study 1 hour of new content in verbal, 1 hour of new content in quant. No. Now, if you are someone who studies full time, who is, for example, a doctor who's taken some time off, an oil and gas professional, or someone in merchant navy, then you can always watch the recordings. You can attend certain classes on time and watch the recordings of other classes. You get access to the recordings as soon as you complete your purchase. Mithun, yes, it's only on weekends because during the week you have to complete the prerequisites. There's so much work that you need to do during the week that it doesn't make sense for us to do that classes. Elias says that, hey, do you count the hours that you put in a live session? No, we don't, Elias. Right now, Adobe Connect doesn't give us that plugin where we can count how long did you attend the session. We are actually working with them to get those insights. And once we have that, you'll see that reflected. But yes, that's a point. And thank you for pointing that thing out. I'm really happy to see you so diligent about pointing it out. At what stage should you take mocks? You should take ability quizzes first. Make sure you're done with SCCR and R. So first of all, you should take a mock when you're starting. It'll give you a good starting score. Then as you go through SCCR and R, you take ability quizzes. And then once you're done with verbal, you may take a mock test. Or when you're done with 80% of your preparation, you can take a mock test. Again, your GMAT roadmap tells you everything. Divya says, is the guarantee for 70 points in verbal only? It's up to a 7-point guarantee on a scale of 60. Let me give you the details of the guarantee over here. Here are the details of the guarantee. You can really see it depends on the starting points overall. If your starting point is less than V20, we guarantee a plus 7 point. The starting point is between on the verbal side between V21 and V27, a 5-point guarantee. If it's V28 to V37, it's a plus 4-point guarantee, which means if you have a V37, we guarantee a V41. And if you have a V41, we guarantee a V44. Which, by the way, if you have a V41, you get to a V44, you're most likely going to get $50,000 worth of scholarship. Similarly, on the quant side, you can see the guarantees as well. You know, if your starting score is less than a Q30, we guarantee a plus 7 points. If it's between Q30 and Q40, we guarantee a plus 5 points. From where should you start after giving a mock straight away? Again, go through your Mariappa says, may I write here for a personalized advice? Yes, Mariappa, you can. If you don't need to look at your data in the course, then definitely I'll be happy to give that personalized advice to you over here. If I need to look at the data in the course, then I will need to basically ask you to write to me. So it just depends on whether I need to or not. So yeah, if you want to send an email, you can send it to rajat@gmat.com, or you can write your query over here, either way. Udit says, do guarantees come only with the live session package? Yes. So that again, guarantees means we have to ensure that you prepare, and that's something that we do with live sessions. If you're someone who's diligent, you can really see the stats, and you can see the success rate is of our students is so high. And if you don't want us to track your improvement, if you just want the system to track your improvement, then you can opt for an online course. But 70% of the students opt for an online course. Do we share target subscores and subsection such as arithmetic, let's say NP? We can help you with that if that's what you need. Yes. Okay, guys, with that, if there are no other questions, then I'd love to really ask you guys to work on the next steps, take a look at the free trial and make sure that each one of you has your own personalized study plan and your own personalized starting packages. Do we offer just a verbal live course? We don't. We offer a verbal online course, but live comes with both quant and verbal. It's just when you want live, you want to give an integrated offering. You want to really make sure you get all the mocks and everything. So that's why we don't offer just the verbal live. Guys, with that, I want to thank everyone. If you have any other question, you can write to me at rajat@e-gmat.com. Thank you very much and good luck for your test.